Today's professional development for teachers focuses on student-centered instruction and higher order thinking, each of which are areas in which our teachers have expressed concern. They are struggling in these areas, so we want to provide them with some resources of what does this look like, how do we implement this in our classroom, and just the practicality of what can we do to help our students and closing those achievement gaps. Many of you have developed T-TEST goals focused on student-led learning, student centered instruction, rather than teacher-led instruction. So that means you are doing less of the talking, those students are doing more. We want them taking responsibility of their instruction instead of you facilitating all of it. So we're going to start out by talking about our purpose for today. Our campus vision is to ensure that we're inspiring, enabling, and encouraging all students to learn, grow, and succeed in a global society. So how does student-centered instruction meet these needs? It provides our students with fundamentally sound academic skills. It produces students with diversified and challenging academic career and life skills, enabling them to function in multiple roles in their adult lives. It allows us to design learning experiences that accommodate students' masteries of tasks in different ways and at different times. It also allows us to design rigorous, engaging work that leads students to higher levels of learning. That is our goal. It also helps you to be teachers who are leaders of students. You inspire them, you facilitate their learning by encouraging them and nurturing them. So we have a slide here, and I want you to take a look at it for just a minute. We have a grade 3 reading. We have at approaches, at meets, and at masters. And this was pulled from 2019 on our Tabor report. So just look at that data. Think about, what do you notice? Do you see any trends? Are there any areas of improvement that you can notice? Okay, how about this? It's the same thing, different format, showing our 2019 grade 3 reading student data. So you have your approaches at orange with the darkest orange, your meets the brownish orange, and then our masters with the yellow golden color. Yes, we did do better than the district.
And the state.
So what else? You already started talking about what did you notice from the chart. Okay, we'll go back to the chart, but what are some things we noticed? Just looking at this graphic representation, what are some things you notice?
The majority of kiddos are approaching grade level.
Okay, the majority of our students are approaching grade level. Do you notice anything else? This data right here is not represented. We do have those students, but since they are below a certain amount for confidentiality purposes, they're not displayed in the chart. So you can't identify those students. Any other trends that you notice? The main gap is we're looking at our approaches, and there's a significant drop to our masters. So how do we meet those needs? The hope is that student-centered instruction and higher order thinking will address those needs. So what is student-centered instruction? Most often it's referred to, the students taking responsibility for their learning. But this is a quick little video to give you a little bit more about what it truly is.
A chalkboard, a desk, the homework, the books. The day begins and ends when the bells ring. For centuries now, this has defined what all of us think about school. We have come to believe that this is the one way that students will learn. And with that belief, we have taught all of our students in pretty much the exact same way. But the world has changed, and what it means to be ready to succeed in the future has also changed. That means our model of learning must change. It's happening now, and it needs to happen even more. In more places, for all students, especially for those for whom the current system isn't working. There is strong data that shows we need to rethink learning. Like remodeling a house, we're not just adding a new coat of paint, we're updating the outdated parts and making it more modern and efficient, strengthening what works and fixing what doesn't. Gone are the days when some students can excel and others just get by. Our society needs all kids to excel at high levels. And to make this happen, we need to engage our students like never before. This is student-centered learning. It incorporates a student's skills and interests into the learning process, making the experience more personalized and involving the student in his or her own future. What makes this work? There are 4 key principles of student-centered learning. Number 1, learning is personalized. Personalized learning happens when teachers know students, have strong relationships with them, and can meet students where they are in their development. Number 2, learning is competency-based. Learning is about the information and skills a student has mastered, not just moving through a curriculum. In a competency-based system, students can proceed at their own pace in every subject, enabling teachers to respond to individual needs, interests, and challenges. Number 3, learning happens anytime, anywhere. Students will often make important discoveries about themselves and the world around them when they learn beyond the traditional school day and outside the traditional school walls. Learning doesn't start and stop when the bells ring. And number 4, the last key to student-centered learning is students take ownership. Don't make a decision about students without students. They play a direct role in their own success, actively engaging with the process to ensure the impact is lasting and meaningful. For student-centered learning to work, all 4 of these principles must work together. This is not an a la carte approach. It's reimagining education so it works for all students. The fact is, our world is changing. And with the latest in child development research, we know better than ever before how children and young adults learn. The facts are there, and they point to the need for a new system of learning designed around each student. And when this student becomes stronger and more focused, all of us will benefit from a new generation that is contributing to our communities and our world in so many ways. This is student-centered learning.
So as you can see, this directly ties into our vision to make those students global learners in our society, engaging in that community factor. The hardest part for us is that many of us have taught for several years. So that shift from the teacher being the sole person who's giving instruction in the classroom and facilitating that learning, it's hard to move from that to allowing those students to make those choices and facilitate the learning themselves. So we just watched a video on student-led instruction. So how do you currently in your classroom utilize student-centered, student-led instruction on a daily basis? Are we doing that, or is this something totally new? What are our thoughts?
I don't do it daily, but I do put them in pairs and let them go around and work math problems together. And they have to talk it out. And when they come to me, they don't just have to give the answer. They get to take turns explaining how they came up with it. So they have to be agreed upon before they come to me with their answer.
Do you feel like it helps them with the mastery of the content?
I do. I think it makes the higher ones, they get to kind of teach and explain, and then the lower ones, they get to hear it in a different way also. So they don't just hear it from me, they're hearing it from their peers, and then a lot of times, I always make them have to explain it too. So they're
It's a learning
having.
experience for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Is anyone else incorporating?
Yeah, I do in my reading intervention. If we're working on a new concept, say for instance silent letters and words, I might put a whole bunch of silent letters or words with silent letters and have the kids look at them and say, okay, what is common about all these words? And they'll sit and they'll study it, make all kind of guesses, and usually someone does get it. And I feel that if they come up with that on their own, I think they learn it faster if they've come up with it.
Well, I think that goes hand in hand with what our fourth grade utilizes for the Jeff Anderson patterns of power. They're presented with that grammar example. It's a sentence with a skill, and what do you notice? Okay, what can you note about it? Can we recreate this same type of sentence? So I think it goes hand in hand with what we're already doing in certain grade levels, but it's great to hear that you're utilizing that as well. Anyone else? It's really hard for teachers to just make that transition and just trust that these students are going to come up with phenomenal ideas. You just have to give them time. It's not going to be an instant they know that. You've got to give them that think time. So we have two examples here. This is our first example. We're going to decide, okay, is this student-led instruction or is this teacher-led instruction? So I'll read these. I know it's a little bit small up here, but being clear about how to do well in your class, and these all go together. Admonishing students to think, helping students master content, helping students continuously practice and revise how they perform on one assessment form, creating curriculum and instruction around standards, handing students a rubric or scoring guide, letting students choose the project's product, choosing power standards in a staff meeting in the middle of summer PD with 4 teachers from your department or grade level, allowing students to choose from 2 novels that are unlike anything they've ever seen or experienced in their lives, worksheets and essays, giving struggling readers a few extra minutes to read a 17-page short story, starting class with a standard and target, giving an on-demand assignment even though you just finished a writing piece or a unit, framing learning in terms of letter grades and certificates and completion, grading every assignment, and recording those grades. So what are our thoughts? Is this teacher-led or student-led?
Teacher-led.
What makes us think that it's teacher-led? Are there any clues?
The teachers deciding where their path of learning is deciding how many minutes they have to do it, is deciding when they have to do it. The teacher is leading them to the standard and target. Yeah.
Okay, let's look at this next one. I might be trying to trick you. Okay, so we have being clear about how you will promote, measure, and celebrate understanding, modeling how to think for students, helping students understand what's worth understanding, diversifying what you accept as evidence of understanding, creating curriculum and instruction around a need to know, collaborating with students to create the rubric or scoring guide, letting students choose the project's purpose, choosing power standards from your curriculum after meeting with both students, parents, and community members, so that's all of our stakeholders, that voice their unique societal and cultural needs, letting students choose their own media form that reflects the purpose of the reading, choice boards, placing struggling readers in a literature circle that gives them an authentic role. This increases their oral fluency and reading speed, and it keeps them from feeling broken. Starting class with a story, using on-demand writing prompts as the summative assessment, framing learning in terms of process and growth and purpose, and then we're not, choosing what's graded carefully and considering other work as practice. So again, it goes back to we're not grading every single thing. So would this be teacher-led or student-led?
Student-led.
It's student-led, but are there still areas that are still teacher-led? Yeah, so it's not total release of here's everything if you're on your own. It's just like a gradual release model.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is student-centered instruction explicitly? Okay, it's teaching that's centered around the student. It requires the teacher to have a true awareness of student abilities and current levels of performance. You're not planning everything in the summer. You might have a group of kids that come to you, they already know it. Let's not spend time on that. Let's delve into, okay, you already know this, how much farther can we get you? It might be ahead of where they should be, but we're pushing them to that higher level of thinking. Rather than focusing on that prescribed curriculum, which might be your scope and sequences, the instruction is based on the areas of greatest need. Student-centered learning has a positive impact on learning, but most of our schools are still designed for teacher-centered instruction. We haven't made that total transition. It's scary for people. The resources we use, including our textbooks, our worksheets, and the structures in place, including our standardized tests that we love, schedules, and report cards, make it very difficult for you to implement student-centered learning. Of course, no classroom is ever going to be 100% student-centered. So here are some examples of what you might use to make your lessons student-centered. And this is in the handout as well. It's a little bit smaller. I'd be happy to blow it up for you if you would like me to afterwards. So we have cooperative learning, presentations, KWL charts, brainstorming, discussions, even small groups working with those other students, jigsaws, role play, inquiry-based learning, models, Q&A, even debates. Most of us utilize games on a daily basis, especially in our centers or stations. It even suggests social media as a way to make learning more student-centered. So there's a whole lot of options here, and it gives you an in-depth breakdown of how do we use this to make learning more student-centered. So there are 6 aspects of a student-centered classroom. We have active learning, we have collaborative learning, differentiation, social emotional learning and needs, student voice, and technology integration. Active learning consists of more than just learning and recalling facts. It's really easy to say, okay, what's 5 times 5? That's just a recall of information. How do we move beyond, okay, what is 5 times 5? What does it really look like? What does it mean? According to Piaget's model theory of learning, constructivism states that each learning experience starts with our existing beliefs. Learning is an active process where the learner builds on what they know to construct understanding. We don't start out with all of our knowledge. It builds over time. Active learning is not necessarily better. It just highlights the importance of being an active process. Providing instruction that matches how our brain works will benefit our students. The process of active learning allows for the development of deeper understandings, retention, and an increase in skill fluency. The most effective step towards achieving active learning is to limit the amount of time that teachers are talking. So again, it goes right back to, this is student engagement. Students are engaged and participating. Over time, rather than conducting lessons in a lecture format, the students are going to be engaging in authentic dialogue. And those aren't conversations that are at the basic level of balloons of what is, how do you, like, it's more of higher level analysis of how do you know this, what can we create, what can we synthesize and analyze. This transition will lead to an increase in student-led discussions and inquiry-based learning. So collaborative learning. I think we do a pretty phenomenal job with collaborative learning on a daily basis. It might not necessarily be in the student-led instruction, student-centered instruction area, but overall we're having students work together. Even this year, we had to make a few changes, but those students are still working together. Collaboration is a key aspect of that student-centered classroom. A single teacher cannot give enough attention to every student in that classroom. No matter how hard you work, there's always going to be one kid, at least, that you're not going to be able to focus on because you have the grand scheme of every other student. I know that's hard to accept because we want to help every single one the whole entire time, but we have to be realistic. Collaborative learning is both effective and efficient. When groups are collaborating, students are obtaining feedback from peers, developing social emotional skills, which allow them to learn complex concepts at a more appropriate level. It's developmentally appropriate for them. Collaboration can be as simple as utilizing turn and talks, rubrics, group projects, and promoting collaborative learning. You didn't even know it, but you already participated in student-led instruction at the beginning of this presentation. And now it's teacher-led, sorry. So collaboration is more effective when it's through inquiry. Completing those assignments together, yes, you can get a grasp of who knows stuff, but it's not nearly as effective. But they do acquire learning that way. With the typical set and get learning strategies that have been implemented over the years, many students are not accustomed to you letting them have that freedom or choice. In some instances, students are going to need time to master those skills, and you're going to have to give them instruction of how do you collaborate with someone. They're not used to these conversations of, Well, let's talk about how did you get this answer? What do we do first? They're just used to, okay, what's the answer? They call it back. So teaching those social skills will help our students be effective in collaborating. So we have differentiation. Many of you work with different student groups on a daily basis. It just consists of any adjustments made to address student needs. There are 4 primary ways that this can be accomplished. The content is what the students learn. The process is how they learn. The product, how do we measure our learning? And the environment, where students learn. So those are 4 considerations that you want to think about when we're looking at differentiation. So the curriculum aspect of it is students access it, how they access it. The product, they're demonstrating, they're creating things. Process, how are these things sequenced for them on a daily basis so that they can acquire that learning. And then the environment, how do you structure your classroom or your learning to facilitate differentiation and success for our students. Most often, scaffolding is utilized to ensure that differentiation is meeting those student needs. However, this isn't always effective. Just because you differentiate a lesson, that doesn't mean that those kids are going to be successful. If a student who reads on grade level is struggling to interpret a text, it makes sense to try a different approach. But if a student is above or below grade level, we need to differentiate the content, which we do on a daily basis. When diverse learners are expected to achieve the same outcomes, it leads to over-scaffolding. This happens when we help students appear successful, even when they haven't mastered a standard. So when we looked at those STAR results, you see those subpopulations. We have students in Hispanic, the African American, even our low socioeconomic status. Those percentages drop. We've got to get those scores up so that they are achieving at the same rate as the rest of our students. This leads back to differentiation. How are we meeting those student needs? So social and emotional learning. Today, more than ever, our students need these skills. They don't know how to react to the environment that's around them. This is not normal. It's our new normal. But they still need some assistance with those types of things. We can't just teach reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore. It's got to be more than that. In order to be successful, they need these social emotional skills. Some of these might be self-control, cooperation, self-regulation. There's a few more that you'll see on a graph in just a moment. But once they've developed this sense of metacognition, of knowing and understanding how they learn, they're more likely to become successful. So here's that graph I was mentioning. You have your self-management skills, your self-awareness, your responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness of being empathetic to others. So all 5 of these aspects make up that social and emotional learning that many of our students struggle with on a daily basis. They don't have these skills. These 5 skills, help these students with projects, with collaboration, just communicating with their teachers in general. So we want these things to be utilized on a daily basis for those kiddos. Student voice. If you think about, we have an internet service, okay? But you can only access one website. Will that make you feel very successful? Now, what if we have a TV with just one TV channel? That's what it's like in a teacher-led classroom. There's no opportunity for change or any flexibility. For students who attend class all day, listening to those lectures, following the directions, that's exactly how they feel. They have one internet service and one website and one TV and one TV channel. We want to broaden that and give them the whole total package. If students don't have a voice or choice, they become bored, disengaged, which leads to our disciplinary issues. In order to increase interest in student engagement, they must have a voice. Something as simple as conducting a survey, asking for suggestions, including them in classroom discussions can help them become more interested and engaged in this lesson. This is a tough area, but allowing students to choose when their homework might be due, yes, that sounds like, oh man, like what if they choose and it's late? Okay, well, let's give them 5 days. They decide, when do I want to do my homework? Monday through Friday. They know Friday's the deadline, but let them choose what day is it due. Now, yes, in the teacher brain, you're like, well, I can't grade all of these until this day, or this is inconvenient, or this causes me to do this. Just allow them to be flexible. Take a deep breath, let them make that choice. Technology integration, we do this every day on a daily basis. This allows us to not only differentiate our lessons, but it is student-centered, and the teacher-centered instruction is how it's being utilized. When students are able to utilize devices, they are at the center of their learning. They can complete collaborative assignments, presentations, they can work with other students, research videos, create videos. Any of those things we can do through technology integration. So how is this going to benefit our students? Those 6 signs are indicators of student-centered classrooms. They're components of those student-centered classrooms. That doesn't mean your classroom's not successful if you don't have those 6 aspects, but it does help our students. If you just focus on one of those implementations, it's going to drastically assist our students in being successful. Most often, this type of instruction is achieved through project-based learning assignments. So if you haven't ever checked into those, project-based learning assignments just broaden that knowledge, creates hands-on activities. Instead of just doing the area and perimeter for a math problem on a workbook page, they might have to design an entire house and build like little walls and then measure it with graph paper. It just makes it a little bit more relevant and realistic for them. So, what does this type of instruction look like? This is just a blog that I found interesting. And it talks about some things that you can do. You can provide students with choice boards. So they get to choose. This is much like what we do in Schoology for art and music. They get to go choose an activity that they want to participate in. The self-assessment rubrics. These allow students to evaluate, okay, do I get this or do I not? Where am I at on this model? Mild, medium, and spicy strategic grouping. This is just like how you would group RTI, your guided groups inside your classroom. Self-assessment conference, meeting with those students, conferencing on their needs, discussing where they feel as though they are performing, and filling in the gaps that these students do not already have filled in. And that's going to be critical when we're looking at where these students are versus where we want them to be, because clearly there's a discrepancy of what's approaches versus masters. So what is it that we're not doing to get them to that point? So that's just a little blog. So this is an overview of the student-centered instruction. Sorry for the advertisement.
Hello and welcome to Teachings in Education, Student-Centered Learning. This is an instructional approach that places the focus on the students instead of the teacher. So let's begin with the overall goal of student-centered learning. Its mission is to create both independent and responsible learners for the future. Now, there are many positive benefits to using a student-centered classroom model. Research has shown that students learn how to express themselves and articulate their individual ideas. Teachers enjoy using this model because students are engaged in their work and on task. Students are constantly working. That students utilize higher order thinking skills through the inquiry-based learning and problem-solving activities. Also, students get to work at their own pace. Remember, it's the students that drive the lesson, not the teacher. Overall, students learn skills that are transferable and will help them adapt to life in the 21st century workplace. Now, I'll ask, what does a student-centered classroom look like? As school administrators roam the room, they should see students working on assignments as the teacher facilitates. Students are allowed to explore their interests. You may see a student performing an experiment on one of their favorite chemistry topics. Students should be working together as a group and building upon each other's knowledge. cooperative learning frequently takes place in the classroom. The student and teacher should be working hand in hand to achieve mutual learning goals. Here, it is really a partnership in learning between the teacher and the student. Examples of student work should be found in the classroom. Students' projects are placed around the room, posters are hung on the wall, writing samples are there as well. Students are comfortable using technology in the classroom. Technology is used to help students solve problems, just like in real-world situations. A student-centered classroom is not a quiet place. Students should be debating ideas with one another. Students are given a voice and feel empowered. Teachers do this by providing their students with choice in their assignments. Now, let's finish up with some tips for the classroom. First off, try to teach, quote, big ideas to your students. Allow the students to discover the details of these big ideas for themselves. Teachers should give students a chance to evaluate their own learning. Student reflections can be a part of a teacher's grading and assessments. Performance-based assessments and authentic assessments are also an integral component. These type of assessments are what we expect students to see in a real-world workplace environment. Teachers need to be constantly moving around the room as opposed to sitting at their desks. As a teacher wanders, they formatively assess students in a friendly way. Teachers can ask questions without grading students. Right now, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to this channel.
You don't need to subscribe. Okay, so how would you rate your classroom as far as being student-centered or teacher-centered now that you have a greater awareness of what it really looks like? What are your thoughts? Where would you rate yourself? You feel like super strong about it, still a little iffy, or you think it's something we could do?
Well, I feel like I work within the confines of a very old teacher-centered program, and I try to creatively work through the dyslexia needs of my kids by pulling in a technology piece, because there's so much, the world is so open to them with technology, and I try to give them a lot of discovery time, like Bellarmine was talking about, the discovery of sounds and patterns and things in words. So I would rate myself as still way teacher-centered, because I'm, like I said, in the confines of this particular program. But I definitely see the value in the center, the student-centered.
And I think it's not an overnight shift. It's going to be one of those things we have to transition to over time. You can't just overnight say, okay, I'm going to be student-centered classroom. Let's go. So
It takes a lot of planning to plan for that to happen too, so.
all right. So now we're going to move on to higher order thinking. This might be one of my favorite things, and I'm not sure if it's because of the color coding or just the ideas in general. But higher order thinking is how we're going to get those students to that master's level. We do a great job with the recall of information, those basic remembering, understanding. We touch on the apply, okay? But we're not really getting to the analyze, evaluate, and create. Maybe analyze a little bit in 4th grade, but after looking at some things, documentation-wise, lesson-wise, I think we could do more of these top 3 areas, which are create, evaluate, and analyze. Inside your folder, there is something that is called POTS. Okay, this goes hand in hand with this. And these are, this is like an anchor chart for you, but you will see colored pages behind it. And these are for you to utilize in your classroom. So instead of saying the same question, I know that I had a habit of going and saying, okay, this is my go-to question. This is the one I'm most comfortable with. Reaching outside that box to utilize these higher levels. It's color-coded to match the anchor chart, so you know in the back of your mind what you're pulling for versus not. Maybe one thing is not appropriate for that lesson, so you might not pull that color. If you were to create your own little jar, this might be an example of it. So I'm going to pull one out, and I'm looking for blue. Why do you think? Okay, we're pulling out those higher levels. Any of these colors. It's super easy. super cheap for you. It doesn't take much time, it doesn't take much thought, and you're not utilizing those same questions throughout the day. Plus, the students get excited, and they're never going to have any idea of your color scheme of, these are really hard questions, and these are more basic questions. So how do we provide lessons that facilitate higher order thinking? Are we doing any of those things? What are some examples of how you're doing higher order thinking in your classroom?
I think the math talks,
Okay.
you letting them explain and come up with the answers and share different ways.
When I was in your classroom that day observing, you had students giving you an answer. They had to have a 7 in it, in one of the places. I don't remember specifically what you were doing, but there was not one answer. That's really hard for our kids. I'm not looking for a multiple choice answer. You can think beyond the box. You can go to those higher levels, but then can you explain to me why that's happening? So that was great from your classroom that connects to what we're talking about today. You didn't just let those kids choose one response. You made them think a little bit higher. Anything else? Can you think of? So how are we going to improve instruction utilizing higher order thinking? We're moving beyond that memorization of facts. When we remember or memorize that information, it gives information. You don't have to think about it. It just comes right back to you. It's programmed into your brain, so you don't even have to do anything for yourself. Higher order thinking, or HOT for short, takes thinking to higher levels than just restating the facts. It requires we do something with the facts. We must understand them, infer them, connect them with other facts and concepts, categorize them, manipulate them, and put them together in new or novel ways, and apply them as we seek solutions to new problems. Higher order thinking will assist us in moving those students from the approaches and meets categories to the master's reporting category. Schema is a grand part of that. They've got to be able to connect their knowledge to something that they already have stored in their brain. A student might have an image of what a reptile looks like in their mind from the information that they've learned, what they've seen and they've been told. So when a student sees a creature that resembles that, they're going to be able to make that connection of, hey, I think that's a reptile because it matches what I already know or what I've already heard. Students can develop schemata for the tests and certain tests a certain teacher gives, because she always gives the same type of question. Goes back to these questions. If you're always going to ask it in this format, those kiddos memorize your format. When they go to the next grade level, the next teacher doesn't do that. It kind of hurts them in the long run. So we want to be mindful of that when we're designing those tests. Metaphors, similes, and analogies. These are higher levels of thinking for our students. It allows them to explain the abstract or unfamiliar by showing them the shared characteristics, compares items or objects, and concepts. It also results in the creation of an image in the mind's eye. The ability to create similes, metaphors, and analogies is a greater skill than understanding those created by others. So again, it's just utilizing those higher levels of thinking. Visualization, we talk about this in reading and reading comprehension. We want our students to be able to see what they're reading, what they're thinking. Sometimes a person might be able to form those visual images or pictures in their mind that are equally as meaningful as or more meaningful than words. When you're asked the difference between a square and a trapezoid, you see in your mind the difference. Okay, that's a natural visualization. I can see a square in my mind, I can see a trapezoid. This is something you've learned over time. Some of our kiddos don't have that yet, so we've got to teach them, okay, like let's picture this in your mind. What does this look like? If you can do these things, you have the ability to use visual imagery. Visualization is especially helpful to students in subjects such as literature, geography, biography, and even math. Inferring, another reading comprehension skill. We're inferring to draw a conclusion based on gathered evidence. An inference is the conclusion drawn from a set of facts or circumstances. If a person infers that something has happened, they didn't necessarily see it, hear it, think it, smell it. They're utilizing their background knowledge and what the text says to come up with an inference. Sometimes it's confused with implying. An author or speaker implies when the reader or listener infers. When we say that written text or a speaker implies something, we mean that something is conveyed or suggested without being stated outright. For example, if the governor said he would not rule out a tax increase, he implied he might find it necessary to advocate raising some taxes. The inference, on the other hand, is a thought process performed by a reader to draw those conclusions. So when the governor said he would not rule out a tax increase, the listener or reader may infer that the governor had been given new information since he had until now. So like now he's more in favor of the taxes. So there's information that's came over time that has changed his perspective. Problem solving is a key in all subject areas. Being able to problem solve in schools is extremely important. What to write for an essay, how to solve a problem in math, choosing the correct materials for a science experiment, or deciding who to sit next to for lunch. These are all problem solving skills that our kids need to be able to do on a daily basis. They need to be worked out systematically and logically in order to come to a satisfactory conclusion. I found it interesting that Thomas Edison was once asked how he kept from getting discouraged when he had made so many mistakes before he perfected his idea of the light bulb. He tried over 2,000 ways before one worked. I mean, for me, that's just mind-boggling. I would have quit after like probably 20. So Edison responded that he had not made 2,000 mistakes, but rather that he had over 2,000 learning experiences that moved him closer to the answer. So it's more of that growth model, the power of yet. Idea generation. So we want to know what our kids are thinking. They have insights, which is a spontaneous cohesion of several thoughts. And some of them have original ideas that they have made up themselves and have not copied from someone else. Brainstorming, we do this in writing very often. We're generating original ideas to create a new method of doing things. Brainstorming can be done both individually or collaboratively in groups. Most often it's easiest in groups. Those kids can talk about things. They can build on each other's ideas. One student's suggestion might give another student an idea or an option. Critical thinking involves the person using their own knowledge or point of view. In addition to evaluating other people's ideas, critical thinking can also be utilized to evaluate things. A person does this when they are deciding which telephone or book to buy. Critical thinking can sometimes be carried too far because nobody likes the person who argues about everything and only feels his point of view is right. Creativity is not something that we value enough. We want that one right answer, but we need to be making sure that those students feel like they can create their own ideas. They're flexible. They're not copying the ideas that someone else has. It's usually thought of as divergent thinking, to spin off the ideas of someone else, but it's also convergent for when someone has created something, their thinking may converge only on the ideas and information that pertain to that particular topic. There are 3 types of intelligences. Robert Sternberg, a well-known professor of psychology and education at Yale, says that successful people use 3 kinds of intelligence: analytical, creative, and practical. A successful person, according to Sternberg, utilizes all 3. So we have analytical intelligence. It's exactly what you think. They're analyzing data. They're analyzing tasks. The analytical student likes school. They're good at analyzing material. They're evaluating, judging, comparing, constructing, critiquing, explaining why, and examining. Sorry, that's not a word. They might be doing this when they decide what skateboard they want to buy, what phone they want to buy. They also do this when they decide which movie to go to or which TV program to watch. Someone who has creative intelligence goes back to that creativity. They're original thinkers who see things differently. They feel confined by school because they're asked to do things in an uncreative way. They may often get average grades of just that basic borderline in school because they ask questions that may seem odd or unusual. They might be viewed by their teachers as a pain because they want to do things their own way. So those kids that kind of give you a hard time, maybe they're those creative thinkers that we're not allowing to be creative because of those multiple choice answers. Solutions to the world's problem will never be found in a textbook. They reside in the minds of creative, inventive people. So it's important for all students to exercise their creative muscles. And practical intelligence, which is the last of the three intelligences, is said to have, these people are said to have good common sense. They may not make the best grades, but they know how to use the knowledge and how to adapt it to different situations and how to get along with others. These students can take the knowledge, apply it to real life situations, and they can practice demonstrating, using, applying, and implementing the information learned. There's not one type of thinking that is the absolute best. We want to implement all of those into one so that we're engaging all of those students from different areas. Inside that folder, there's also a handout that has 30 strategies for enhancing higher order thinking. Some of these you might already be doing, some of them you might not. Some of them are for older grade levels, but I feel like with a little bit of change, you could implement some of these into your own classroom. So what we're going to finish out this professional development with is how can we combine both student-centered instruction and higher order thinking to develop our lesson plans where they meet the needs of our students. In that folder, I made 3 copies of lessons. You have a kindergarten science lesson, a 2nd grade science lesson, and a 4th grade science lesson. They're all 3 labeled. So what I would like us to do is to work collaboratively together to design a lesson plan that answers these questions. There is a template in there that has tables of what questions we want to focus on. They're also right here. So we're going to take a look at whatever grade level lesson you'd like with your partner or team beside you. Decide what do we want students to be able to learn at the end of this lesson. What level of blooms are we going to have them engaged in? Are they going to be at the create level? Are they going to be at the knowledge and recall level? What will our students be doing? How do we know if students are mastering content in accordance with our expectations? How are you ensuring that students are utilizing higher order thinking skills? So we're going to develop a lesson that is both student-centered and includes those higher levels of understanding. And lastly, this is a golden question right now. How do we get those virtual students to receive the same level of high-quality instruction? It's a golden question right now. How do we get those kids to be able to do the same things that we're doing in class and collaborate with those peers? And I know that's been a challenge. So that's what we're going to work on now. So work. You want to pair up, you want to team up, decide what grade level, what are some things we want our students to learn, what level would they be at, and let's go from there. Okay?
Which one do you hear?
Which thing?
Especially at this time of day.
So we all gravitate.
Classroom.
And
sometimes I use working with students with this for that.
What I found most interesting about this is, if you look, they're just asking them to draw. They're not asking them anything about the earth processes or the rocks. So it's not really requiring them to think outside the box at all. So how do we get them to do that? I mean, the sum it up page is just a picture of a cartoon.
Yeah.
Students in the sandbox. No directions, just
Draw an X on each rock.
And you can see as we go up in those grade levels, that's 2nd grade. It's a little bit tougher, but it's still just identifying things.
See.
I think sometimes with kindergartners though, that even to get them to some of these higher levels, I think there's so much that's done verbally that you don't have all of the barriers that we face that they can't overcome the written expression or whatever, that they can go ahead and you can ask them, do you agree that this is this? And they can tell you why. There's so much verbal response. But some of our deep thinkers, even in kindergarten, don't end up being our deep thinkers in 4th grade. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so it's really not asking
Yes.
them
Having
to
these
focus on
kids
anything
do all
to do
types
with
of experiments.
identify water.
which one floats,
Yep.
which one
So-
sinks fastest,
If
which
you just
one.
put them all together and ask them to
Is that the rocks?
Oh, it's circle,
ones that are all
oh, the
together.
circle
That's right.
water.
They would do that themselves.
Oh,
Yeah.
and
You'll
the
see
square
some
water.
things that they will think.
Color
Yeah.
the fish.
And they wouldn't, not necessarily put them the way you would.
Right.
So that's one way too, because they're supposed to observe that side by side shape and texture, so.
Right. I
If
can
you could
have
just be
this,
sitting data as you're
Skills
scrolling around,
reading the information.
seeing if they're doing that.
I'd give them Play-Doh, they could press these
Still
into
practicing
and
skills that they're-
see all the stuff. I mean, there's.
Well, and when you look at the fourth grade
You
compared,
do that,
Oh, yeah.
it doesn't look like pretty.
I mean, this
And
is just
certainly
one lesson
this.
compared to, that's one lesson of kindergarten,
Which
but you
would,
can see how long it is.
Yeah.
Just the words.
Just like sitting there and reading, expecting.
I mean,
someone to
that's
sit
a
there
sum
and,
up.
like,
Compared to this, it's entirely different, but it's still not above the recall level, it's vocabulary. So how do we know that they've mastered these skills?
Because they can fill in the
You would think if they can fill in that crossword puzzle, they know every answer about, or the process of it, right?
Vocabulary up front,
Yeah.
size words, shape words.
But if they
But
like
even
first
second
out and
grade
you
is
ask
so
them, they'll do
basic
it
and
and
third.
then
Yeah.
you teach them.
Yeah,
what
I
they
guess,
did.
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
probably
Say, look
second
what
grade
you
more,
did.
like kindergarten, you can start
I mean,
having
there's
them
so
maybe
much
more like of the
that they can
about,
be
like,
analyzed.
here are different types
or,
of rocks,
you know,
like we know how rocks are formed from
comparing,
kindergarten, so why do you
creating
think this one
these
is,
rocks that,
you know, like a lava rock is
it's
just,
not even mentioned.
has all holes in it, and it's like,
like this.
whereas this rock is
Why does
solid
one
and
bring their brain?
compact and stuff.
They can do that at that age.
I love that, like analyzing,
Mhm.
inventing,
Yeah.
in second grade.
Yes, and like on the create, and now you have them grouped one way. Now figure out a different way to group them.
And they can.
They can.
But they have to have the time.
Well,
Definitely.
and
Sometimes you have to lead them a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
because, yeah, it involves
You can
like
just pick
more
one up
lessons
and say,
for
oh,
me to
you
do
said
this,
that
or
is like
you know,
this.
structure.
Somewhat.
Definitely.
And, yeah,
Time is a barrier.
have to
Yes.
be
And
prepared
small
for
groups,
Mhm.
little
all
kids,
different
that is a
levels
barrier.
of
Yes.
attention.
The professional development for teachers over student-centered instruction and higher order thinking focuses on the Texas Administrative Code Standard C, which is leading learning. We're trying to develop a more rigorous curriculum for our students, closing those gaps and moving our students from the approaches and meets category to the master's category. There's a huge discrepancy there. So that's a goal for us and our teachers. From the commissioner's rules, we're focusing on standard 1. And then from the Texas 268 principal domains and competencies, we're focusing on domain 2, competency 3, which again ties into that curriculum, revising our curriculum, the scope and sequences, and just providing that high quality instruction for our students.